Teroffice's voir dire. The objection had to do with questions about high-stress events in the jurors' lives. I asked Mr. Teroffice to connect that more with the jurors' ability to be fair and impartial in the trial and to steer away from anything that might be viewed as conditioning the jury to better understand the experiences of either Mr. Mew or the other witnesses during the incident. Mr. Anderson, is there more that you want to say?
No.
All right. Mr. Teroffice?
No, sir.
All right. Next, this morning there was a request to allow Sandra Mew to sit in the courtroom despite the sequestration order. Having given it some thought, I will grant that request. The reason for sequestration is to mitigate the risk of witnesses conforming their testimony to what they hear in the courtroom. Ms. Mew has given at least one, possibly more, statements to law enforcement, so her testimony is more or less locked in. The attorneys know what she's going to say, and the risk of her deviating from that is minimal. She's also scheduled to testify near the beginning of trial, so I don't see risk to her being present during the testimony and opening statements. Those are the two things I have on my list. Oh, one more thing. Mr. Anderson, how long do you expect to take during your opening?
I think about 40 minutes, Judge.
Okay. So what I'll probably do is give the preliminary instructions, state opening statement. We'll take a short recess, and then we'll come back in for the defense opening statement. That way we break up the afternoon a little bit.
Yes, and then are we taking a break after my opening before we do anything else?
Probably not. I think we'll just roll right into witnesses after that.
Yeah. The plan after, my understanding is the first thing the state's going to do is mark the video in the frames from that video as evidence. We have no objection to its being admitted without a witness, and then it's my understanding they're going to ask to publish it. We have no objection to their publishing it immediately before we have any witnesses. So I know that's a little unusual. I just thought we'd give Your Honor a heads up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Nelson, you'll be giving the opening statement?
Yes, sir.
And you'll be giving yours, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, for our side, Judge, who's ever in this chair is going to be the one doing whatever's next. So.
Same?
We'll try to, but
Okay.
yes.
We'll do our best then.
We'll at least. That's good enough.
All right. Let's bring the jury in. Please stay standing. We have one, yeah, that's your. All right, please be seated. All right, members of the jury, good afternoon, welcome back. The first order of business is to administer the jury oath. So I'm going to ask you to stand one more time, raise your right hand, and the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you swear that you will well and truly try the issue joined in the matter announced by the court, and unless discharged by the court, a true verdict given according to the law and to the evidence given in court? So help you God.
Please have a seat. All right. Members of the jury, before the trial begins, there are certain instructions you should have to better understand your functions as a juror and how you should conduct yourself during the trial. I am going to read these instructions aloud. I've also published them on the monitors, so you are welcome to follow along if you'd like. Your duty is to decide the case based only on the evidence presented at trial and the law given to you by the court. Anything you may see or hear outside the courtroom is not evidence. All people deserve fair treatment in our system of justice, regardless of their race, national origin, religion, age, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, education, income level, or any other personal characteristic. People make assumptions and form opinions from their own personal backgrounds and experiences. Generally, we are aware of these things, but you should consider the possibility that you have biases of which you may not be aware, which can affect how you evaluate information and make decisions. You must carefully evaluate the evidence and resist any urge to reach a verdict that is influenced by any bias for or against any party, witness, or attorney. Personal opinions, preferences, or biases have no place in a courtroom, where our goal is to treat all parties equally and to arrive at a just and proper verdict based on the evidence. Do not begin your deliberations and discussion of the case until all of the evidence is presented and I have instructed you on the law. Do not discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else until your final deliberations in the jury room. This order is not limited to face-to-face conversations. It also extends to all forms of electronic communications. Do not use any electronic devices, such as a mobile phone or computer, text or instant messaging, or social networking sites, to send or receive any information about this case or your experience as a juror. But we will stop or recess from time to time during the trial. You may be excused from the courtroom when it is necessary for me to hear legal arguments from the lawyers. If you come in contact with the parties, lawyers, or witnesses, do not speak with them. For their part, the parties, lawyers, and witnesses will not contact or speak with the jurors. Do not listen to any conversation about this case. Do not research any information that you personally think might be helpful to you in understanding the issues presented. Do not investigate this case on your own or visit the scene either in person or by any electronic means. Do not read any newspaper reports or listen to any news reports on radio, television, over the internet, or any other electronic application or tool about this trial. Do not consult dictionaries, computers, electronic applications, social media, the internet, or other reference materials for additional information. Do not seek information regarding the public records of any party or witness in this case. Any information you obtain outside the courtroom could be misleading, inaccurate, or incomplete. Relying on this information is unfair because the parties would not have the opportunity to refute, explain, or correct it. Do not communicate with anyone about this trial or your experience as a juror while you are serving on this jury. Do not use a computer, cell phone, or other electronic device, including personal wearable electronics, applications, or tools with communication capabilities, to share any information about this case. For example, do not communicate by telephone, blog post, email, text message, instant message, social media post, or in any other way on or off the computer. Do not permit anyone to communicate with you about this matter, either in person, electronically, or by other means. If anyone does, despite your telling them not to, you should report that to me. I appreciate that it is tempting when you go home in the evening to discuss this case with other members of your household, but you may not do so. This case must be decided by you, the jurors, based on the evidence presented in the courtroom. People not serving on this jury have not heard the evidence, and it is improper for them to influence your deliberations and decision in this case. After this trial is completed, you are free to communicate with anyone in any manner. These rules are intended to assure that jurors remain impartial throughout the trial. If any juror has reason to believe that another juror has violated these rules, you should report that to me. If jurors do not comply with these rules, it could result in a new trial involving additional time and significant expense to the parties and the taxpayers. You are to decide the case solely on the evidence offered and received at trial. Evidence is, first, the sworn testimony of witnesses, both on direct and cross-examination, regardless of who called the witness. Second, the exhibits the court has received, whether or not an exhibit goes to the jury room. Third, any facts to which the lawyers have agreed or stipulated, or which the court has directed you to find. It is not necessary that every fact be proved directly by a witness or an exhibit. A fact may be proved indirectly by circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence from which a jury may logically find other facts according to common knowledge and experience. Circumstantial evidence is not necessarily better or worse than direct evidence. Either type of evidence can prove a fact. Attorneys for each side have the duty and the right to object to what they consider are improper questions asked of witnesses and to the admission of other evidence which they believe is not properly admissible. You should not draw any conclusions from the fact an objection was made. By allowing testimony or other evidence to be received over the objection of counsel, the court is not indicating any opinion about the evidence. You, the jurors, are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight of the evidence. You are not required to, but you may take notes during this trial, except during the opening statements and the closing arguments. The court will provide you with materials. In taking notes, you must be careful that it does not distract you from carefully listening to and observing the witnesses. You may rely on your notes to refresh your memory during your deliberations. Otherwise, keep them confidential. After the trial, the notes will be collected and destroyed. You will not have a copy of the written transcript of the trial testimony available for use during your deliberations. Therefore, you should pay careful attention to all of the testimony because you must rely primarily on your memory of the evidence and the testimony introduced during the trial. It is the duty of the jury to scrutinize and to weigh the testimony of witnesses and to determine the effect of the evidence as a whole. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is, the believability, of the witnesses and of the weight to be given to their testimony. In determining the credibility of each witness and the weight you give to the testimony of each witness, consider these factors. Whether the witness has an interest or lack of interest in the result of this trial, the witness's conduct, appearance, and demeanor on the witness stand, the clearness or lack of clearness of the witness's recollections, the opportunity the witness had for observing and for knowing the matters the witness testified about, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony, the apparent intelligence of the witness, bias or prejudice, if any has been shown, possible motives for falsifying testimony, and all other facts and circumstances during the trial which tend either to support or to discredit the testimony. Then give to the testimony of each witness the weight you believe it should receive. In your determination of credibility, you must avoid any and all bias based on a witness's race, national origin, religion, age, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, education, income level, or any other personal characteristic. There is no magic way for you to evaluate the testimony. Instead, you should use your common sense and experience. In everyday life, you determine for yourselves the reliability of things people say to you, and you should do the same thing here. The state has charged Mr. Mew with 6 crimes that allegedly happened in St. Croix County, Wisconsin on July 30, 2022. In count 1, first-degree intentional homicide. In counts 2 through 5, attempted first-degree intentional homicide. In count 6, battery. Mr. Mew has pled not guilty to all charges. He alleges that he acted in self-defense. Mr. Mew is not required to prove his innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty unless in your deliberations you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Mew is guilty. The burden of establishing every fact necessary to constitute guilt is upon the state. Before you can return a verdict of guilty, the evidence must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Mew is guilty. Because the state has the burden of proof, the state is allowed to present its evidence first. When the state has completed its evidence, Mr. Mew may, but is not required to, present evidence. If he presents any evidence, the state is allowed to present evidence in response to that, called rebuttal evidence. We've now reached the stage where the attorneys will deliver their opening statements. The purpose of an opening statement is to give the lawyers an opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence will show, so that you will better understand the evidence as it is introduced during the trial. I must caution you, however, that the opening statements are not evidence. First, we'll hear from the state, then we'll probably take a short recess, and then we'll hear from the defense. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Judge. Senseless and horrific acts of violence when all Nicolae had to do was walk away. That's what you're going to see in this case. You'll see he eventually did walk away, but not until after stabbing 5 people. As Judge Waterman said, my name is Carl Anderson. My co-counsel, Brian Smestad, and I represent the state of Wisconsin in this case. It's our duty to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Nicolae Mew is guilty of all charges. You're going to hear in this trial that Nicolae said it was self-defense. But there's a video of what happened. You're going to see the video. You're going to see the sequence of events. You're going to hear a lot in the video. You're going to hear people yelling at Nicolae over 20 times, some version of, "Get away, go away." You hear the boys, the teenagers yelling, "Get away from us, get the fuck away, get back, get away from us, walk away, walk away." You're going to hear that there's another group of tubers, adults, who hear this and come over to help the boys. You're going to hear them yelling, "Go, get your ass and go, go. Get your ass and go. Go, go, go." You're going to hear that Isaac's group and the group of adult tubers, I'll probably refer to them as the Carlson group throughout the trial, didn't know each other. Still don't know each other. You're going to hear from both of those groups testify about what they saw. You're going to hear that there's 6 victims in this case. 1 that was punched, 5 that were stabbed. And you're going to hear from all those victims except Isaac Schuman. That's because on July 30th of 2022, Nicolae Mew killed him. It was the summer before Isaac's senior year of high school. He was living in Stillwater, Minnesota with his mom, stepdad, brother, and stepsister. He was looking forward to going to college after high school. The photo on his left is his last school photo from his junior year of high school. The photo in the middle was his last birthday. He went out to celebrate at a restaurant with his family when he turned 17. The photo on the right, he was showing off the new trailer he bought to his mom for his new car detailing business. On July 30th, 2022, it was a nice day. Weather was in the 80s. Perfect sunny day for tubing. You'll see body cam, but it was busy. There was a lot of tubers on the river. Isaac was tubing with 5 of his best friends. Alex Fang, Juwan Cockfield, Owen Peliquin, Ryan Nelson, Landon Wire, and the last photo is Isaac. His friends called him Bike. These are, you'll see, this is how they were dressed when they were on the river. These are screen grabs from that day. The other group you hear a lot about is the Carlson group. The only one who was stabbed out of Isaac's group was Isaac. The rest of the people stabbed and punched were from the Carlson group. Ryhley Mattison was stabbed. Dante Carlson was stabbed. AJ Martin was stabbed. Tony Carlson was stabbed. Madison Cohen was punched. The other group you'll hear a lot about is Nicolae Mew's group. Some of these folks you'll hear more about than others, likely. Ariel, you'll see him in the video of the incident. Gilma, I expect you'll hear testimony from her. Eric Von Williams, you may see in some body cam, hear testimony. Nicolae Mew, that's Sandy Mew, Nicolae's wife at the time. Ernesto, you'll see in the incident video also. So Nicolae and Ernesto worked together. A lot of these other people knew Nicolae through Ernesto or just met at Nicolae that day. Sergio he's the far right. He wasn't actually in this picture, but he was the last member of their group. So all these groups were tubing on the Apple River. They're all out with friends. They're all drinking. This is a map of the Apple River. Tubers started at River's Edge up on the top right, and they kind of tube in this snaky U shape down and then left and up. A lot of the tubers did stop in this case at the Hideaway. There's a bar there, there's a beach spot to hang out. The incident, the stabbings, occurred shortly before the tubers reached the 35 bridge that crosses over the river. You might hear it referred to as the Sunrise Bridge. And then the place where tubers exit is called the Village Park exit. And you'll hear that the only group of these 3 groups that made it to the exit was Nicolae's group. You'll hear that shortly before the incident, Ariel's phone got knocked in the water. It was in a waterproof case. You'll hear testimony that he wasn't that worried about it. He said he has insurance for his phone, but Nicolae insisted on looking for it. So the group ends up waiting at the sandbar. Nicolae goes downstream. He's got goggles and snorkel. He's going to look for the phone. Isaac's group is tubing a ways downstream. And you'll hear them describe that this older guy is tubing next to their tubes, in extremely shallow water, getting really close to them, not really saying anything. He's got we'll describe a strange look in his face. They're creeped out by him. You'll hear from several of them that he said something about looking for little girls. You'll hear from one or two that he said something about looking for a phone. Jawan, second from the left, filmed the main video in this case. He also filmed a 9-second video shortly before that main video. And in that 9-second video, you'll see Jawan saying, he said he's looking for little girls, he's a raper. And Nicolae is walking away. He doesn't keep walking away. At the end of that video, he stops and he turns around. 2 seconds later is when that main video starts. The video of the stabbings. You'll see at that start of the main video, Nicolae is walking towards the group of tubers. They're down in their tubes, the teenage boys, Isaac's group. In the beginning, when Nicolae is walking towards him, he's got his hand down on a pocket, the right of his shorts. You'll hear from people from his group that that's where he kept his knife. You'll see in the video that he then starts to run. He runs at the boys who are down in their tubes. That's the only time in this video you'll see Nicolae run, when he runs up on the group of teenage boys. He doesn't even run after stabbing 5 people. He walks away. There's his hand on that pocket. He's carrying a snorkel and goggles. That group in the background there, in the middle photo, that's the Carlson's group. And eventually come over in response to the yells of the kids. Nicolae puts his goggles in his mouth and grabs onto their tubes with 2 hands. You'll hear in the video the boys are yelling, "Whoa, whoa, what's this guy doing, weirdo?" You can see their reactions in the video. That's Alex Vang on the left. Nicolae drops his goggles and snorkel in the water. He then starts reaching in the water where they fall into the water. He starts walking around their tubes. They're yelling at him, get away from us, walk away." They're also chirping at him. You'll hear Jawan saying, "He's a pedophile." Nicolae says something back, you can't hear it in the video. He's standing, now this is facing downriver, so the direction they're tubing, that's that bridge going over the river in the background. Boys are yelling, "Get away." That's Isaac in the middle photo with the white hat, purple trunks. That's Isaac again on the left photo, standing with his hands up, fingers splayed. You can see a gold bracelet on his left wrist. You'll see that again later in the video. At this point in the video, you hear the boys start to cheer. And that's because you'll hear from them that the Carlsons, some adults, were coming over to help. Those 2 people you see walking over are Mattison and Dante. Madison's later punched, Dante's later stabbed. There's Isaac's bracelet. As Mattison is walking over, she's yelling, "Go, go, go." Nicolae says, you'll hear it in the video, "They took my snorkel." Madison's pointing and yelling for him to go. You can see in that pocket on his shorts, a metallic clip of his pocket knife. Madison's pointing and yelling at him to go. Nicolae turns his back to her, looks back at the group of boys in the right photo. She directs him back away from the boys, back to her. You'll hear from her, that's why she went over them in the first place, was to try to get him away from the boys. She keeps telling him to go. He starts smiling. He waves upstream towards his group. More women from the Carlson group come over. That's Ryhley in the middle, in that middle photo. She ends up getting stabbed. Right photo, you can see Nicolae puts his hand on that knife in his pocket again. He's smiling. The boys are laughing. They're drunk 17-year-old boys. They have nothing in their hands, as you'll see in the video. They're laughing and pointing at Nicolae. He's smiling. Then you'll see his hands start moving. You can't quite see what they're doing. You can see they come together in front of his waist. You can see behind him, there's nothing but clear and empty water. As Mattison and Ryhley, two women, are talking to him, telling him to leave, he takes out his knife. He opens it, blade up, still smirking, looking straight at the women. You'll not see Nicolae raise his knife and brandish it. You'll not hear him yell at anyone to get back. You'll not see him say anything at this point in the video, after he takes his knife out. You'll not see him try to take a step back or walk away. You will see him looking around, smirking, while continuing to hold the knife down by his side. While holding the knife, he looks around, looks back over at the boys. You can see Ryhley leaning over, trying to keep his attention. Nothing but clear water behind him. You'll see Mattison's got sunglasses on. As more people from the Carlson group come over, that's AJ in the yellow swim trunks. He gets ultimately stabbed, you'll see. That's Dante in the right photo. He gets stabbed. This entire video is 3 minutes and 23 seconds long. It's not a very long video, but from the point in the video when witnesses say Nicolae punched Mattison until you see Nicolae walking off after having stabbed 5 people is only about 20 to 25 seconds. It happens very fast in the video. You'll see that when you see it played in real time. You'll see the boys are loud, they're boisterous. You'll hear that in the video. There's a lot of yelling. Pedophile is looking for little girls. Go, get away from us. You'll not hear anyone in the video threaten Nicolae. You'll not see anyone raising fist to him before it turns physical. You won't see anyone besides Nicolae with a weapon. You won't see the boys touch Nicolae until after stabbings start. The next portions of the still frames is moments before the witnesses say it turned physical when Nicolae punched Mattison in the face, who was one of the women standing in front of him. The Carlsons say he punched Mattison. The boys, the teenagers, say he punched the blonde girl. They didn't know her name, they didn't know each other. It happens fast. Remember, up to this point, Nicolae already has the knife in his hand. After it pans, from the last frames I showed you, AJ was walking over in the yellow swim trunks. The video pans back to the middle. You see Mattison and Ryhley are standing in front of Nicolae. The video pans to the left. You see the boys still laughing. That's Isaac in the background of the middle photo. He's pretty much just standing there in the background. Then you see everybody react, and you hear it. You hear the change in the tone, and this is when witnesses say Nicolae punched Mattison in the face. You'll hear Mattison testify that Nicolae punched her in the face. Madison's sunglasses are no longer on her head. You'll hear her testify that they got knocked off when he hit her. After Nicolae punches Mattison, Dante, her friend, punches Nicolae. You can see that in the right frame. Again, Madison's sunglasses no longer there. Nicolae goes down in the water. You can see in the right photo, he gets slapped. It's shallow water, his butt's in the water essentially. That's AJ in those photos, pushing on Nicolae's back. You'll see that the push doesn't really do anything. Nicolae gets right up with the knife in his right hand, lunges at AJ as AJ's going to push him again. As AJ is pushing Nicolae, Nicolae stabs into his lower abdomen with the blade up and slices up his stomach. You can see in that right photo he just missed his throat, chin. In the middle photo you can see AJ's stomach opened up on the bottom, right above the swim trunks. From the push from AJ, Nicolae goes down, lands in his butt in the water again. You won't see anyone pounce on him at this point or approach him, try to hit him when he's down in the water. You see him try to grab at Tony. It's Tony. You'll hear that's Tony in the jean shorts. Tony walks by him. Tony has his back to Nicolae, and you'll hear Tony yelling in the video, "Get back, get back." You hear testimony from Tony that he thought he was breaking up a fist fight. So he's yelling at somebody off screen to get back. He has his back to Nicolae. Nicolae gets up, still with the knife in his hand. That person in the top left of the left photo is Ryhley. So after Tony, you hear him yelling, directing somebody off screen to get back. He turns to Nicolae and he's yelling, "Get back, get back." And you see him pointing in the video and yelling. And you see Nicolae's hand going back with the knife in it. He makes a stabbing motion off screen. Tony's yelling at him, "Get back." And then you see Ryhley's just been stabbed. That group in the background there that Nicolae's facing with nobody between him and that group is his group. That's his group of tubers. Tony, you'll see and you hear from him when he testifies that he's just yelling at Nicolae to go. Nicolae doesn't. Again, that's his group. In the right photo, the guy with the aviators, that's his friend Ariel, almost up to Nicolae. Nicolae doesn't walk back to his group. Instead, he turns to Tony with the knife in his right hand. He stabs at him twice. You can see Ryhley bleeding in the background. Ariel, Nicolae's friend, is there as he's lunging the knife at Tony. That hand there on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see more clearly in the next still shots. Isaac goes to shove Nicolae. See the gold bracelet? As he's shoving Nicolae, Nicolae lunges out with the knife. Nicolae kind of stumbles back from the push, comes back with his knife covered in blood and dripping blood. You can see the women recoiling from him. Nicolae ends up by his friend Ariel as he's stumbling from the push. You don't see Dante get stabbed in the video, but I expect you'll see evidence and testimony that it was after this. It's not until this point in the video, after he stabbed AJ, Ryhley, Tony, and Isaac, that you hear people start react and realize what's going on to the video. You hear that they all suddenly saw AJ, and you'll see in a second what they saw. But up until that point, people didn't realize that Nicolae was stabbing people. You'll hear in the video the shock and disbelief as what just happened. The camera pans around, you see Nicolae looking in the direction to where AJ and Isaac are. AJ is in the water, holding in his guts. Isaac's friends scatter and run. Juan, who's filming, runs back. Nicolae walks away. You can see at this point, if you recall the photo of Dante, he's got dark chunks on the bottom, light on top. He's got his hands on his torso and he's looking down. Nicolae continues to walk away. He walks by his friend Ariel. On that right photo, he's standing in front of Ernesto. He walks by Ernesto. On the right there, that's Alex Bain running to Isaac, who is collapsed in the water. You see AJ struggling. That's Nicolae by Ernesto. Nicolae continues walking. The camera pans away. When it pans back, Nicolae's off in the distance. Pans down a little bit. And that's what the middle photo is showing. And then you see in the left photo, you see he's approaching the right shore. Camera pans down, pans back up, he's walking away from the right shore. Isaac's group and the Carlson's group start helping each other, try to get to shore, get the victims to shore. Isaac and AJ, who are collapsed. Nicolae starts walking back from the right, over across to where his group is at the sandbar. Camera pans around the water. Water's running red. It's Isaac's hat floating by. Nicolae is almost back to his group. You can see people trying to help AJ and Isaac. You see a couple people from the Carlson's group start to call 911. We hear from 4 people that were stabbed, and none of them saw Nicolae with the knife. They didn't notice he had a knife. They didn't know. They thought they were punched until they looked down and see all the blood. There's not going to be any testimony on what Isaac saw. If he saw Tony get stabbed right in front of him when he went to shove Nicolae, because Isaac's not going to be here to tell what he saw. You hear that some Good Samaritans who are also tubing, some nurses, tended to AJ and Isaac until law enforcement and paramedics arrived. AJ, as a result, was disemboweled. He had to have emergency surgery. He was in the hospital for nearly a month and had to have numerous follow-up surgeries. Ryhley, who was in the bikini in the middle photo, was stabbed in the side. It sliced her diaphragm. She had to have emergency surgery. Tony was stabbed twice. One, he'll describe how he kind of blocked it. He thought it was a punch coming in, so it just kind of scratched him, but the other one went into his torso. Isaac was stabbed in the chest and the torso, cut clean through 2 ribs, and sliced his heart. Died almost immediately. He was 17 years old. Dante was also stabbed in the torso. Nicolae returned to his group. You'll hear from people in his own group. He didn't really say what happened. He said, "They took my knife." They stayed at the sandbar for a while, until a little while, sometime after law enforcement arrived. Multiple members of his group called 911. He did not. They reported they didn't know what happened, but multiple people were injured. One person from their group, Eric Von Williams, went over to help with the wounded. He also spoke with law enforcement when they got to the scene. He's the only one who did. At some point, Nicolae tells his group that they should just float to the exit. So they floated to the exit. You'll see that when law enforcement arrived on the scene, it was chaotic. The information they had was that an unknown subject stabbed 5 people. People didn't know where he was. They were all looking at AJ and Isaac and trying to help each other to shore. Nobody paid attention to where the guy with the knife went. There's dozens of tubers that continue to go through. There's tubers running through the woods trying to find the guy who was stabbing people. Isaac and AJ, there was no place to get to them by road. Officers had to go to the nearest. They went to the 35 bridge and then they had to wade upstream to get to them, float them out on tubes. You'll see that when officers get there, there's bystanders, just other tubers intermixed with victims, intermixed with witnesses. Some of the witnesses were so emotional they couldn't even articulate what happened at first. So, Juwan, who filmed the video, he alerts law enforcement that he's got a video of it. And he pauses it at an image of Nicolae from the video. That deputy circulates it around to other law enforcement who are responding. Officers go down to the exit. One deputy walks right by Nicolae and his group because he's looking for somebody who matches that photo. The reports all that they had where he was by himself. Deputy walks right by Nicolae, but then 2 citizens, one employee of River's Edge who had the photo, and a friend of the owner of River's Edge, alerted law enforcement that they think this guy matches the photo. Nicolae is apprehended. Members of the group asked, why is he being detained? You got the wrong guy. This is how he was dressed when law enforcement made contact with him. You'll see in the body cam, Nicolae doesn't really show any emotion when he's taken into custody. You'll see a video of Sheriff Knutson when Nicolae is in the back of a squad car. Sheriff Knutson goes to check on him. How are you doing? You doing all right? Nicolae says, what's going on? I hear somebody got stabbed. And I fit the description. Nicolae is later told by officers that he's under arrest for homicide and attempted homicide. Ultimately, Nicolae is interviewed by Lieutenant Randy Hart. In that video, you'll see the recording of that interview. His version varies drastically from the video of the incident. The interview is about 45 minutes long. You'll get to see that video, but I'll highlight some portions of it. When Nicolae is interviewed, he's not told there's a video. Lieutenant Hart shows him a screenshot, that one that went around to law enforcement. She asks if he knew that they took his picture. He says, no, he didn't know that. And then he asks if she has any other pictures of him. What other pictures did they give him? So up to this point, Nicolae told his group that they should leave the scene of stabbing, put on a jacket, hat, and sunglasses, try to walk by law enforcement and visit. He said to Sheriff Knudsen, I heard somebody got stabbed. He was told he was under arrest for homicide, attempted homicide. So you'll see in the video, Lieutenant Hart is explaining he doesn't need to speak with her. Nicolae responds, or I can say it was self-defense. Self-defense. There's lots of people that came to me, self-defense, and they produced 2 weapons when I took from them. And that's the only thing I tell you. They hit me, they were on top of me. I don't remember anything after that. I just remember I ran away. You'll see that Nicolae repeats over and over throughout the interview that they pulled knives on him. Because of that, he feared for his life. He also repeatedly says they knocked his goggles off his face. He says they were trying to pull his swim trunks down. And they were snorkeling, so they took my snorkel away. They threw it in the water. They grabbed my pants. One wanted to pull my pants down, and I grabbed onto them. And I don't know who that kid was, but he had a knife on him, and there was another knife, a longer knife, looked like a kitchen knife. They came, they grabbed my snorkel, and they threw it in the water. His goggles are lost. They took them, they grabbed them off my face, and threw them in the water. Not only does Nicolae say repeatedly throughout the interview that they pulled knives on him, he says he did not have a knife. I feared for my life. There was the truth. And they started hitting me, pointing a knife at me, and another kid pointed a knife. I thought that was it for me. So actually, I took it from one of the young kids, and I think that's when I swung back. When you watch the video, the only thing you'll see in other people's hands in that video are drinks, cell phones, and a vape pen. You'll hear testimony from both Isaac's group and the Carlson's group that none of them had knives. Nicolae again, one had it in his hand, so I took his hand and I bent it. I poked him with his own hand. And I took him from his hand and then swung. So I don't know who I hit. I just know that I took the knife from one of those kids. Lieutenant Hart asks, did you have a knife with you? No, absolutely no. Nicolae says he's telling the truth, but he does not know where his knife was. He says he had one earlier to cut the string for the tubes right at the beginning. I left it on I don't even know what I did with it. I either gave it to one of the people or I put it in my truck. To tell you the truth, I don't even know. I don't even know where it's at, to tell you the truth. Maybe one of the bags we had with us, it may have been in, I don't know, maybe I left it and put it back in the car. He says everything happened fast. He doesn't know why they attacked him. I don't even know why they took my snorkel. Don't know why they wanted to pull my pants down. I don't know why they're being so mean. Why did they want to scare me with a knife? They're scaring people on the river. It's a family-oriented river with knives and what they did. I just grabbed the kid's knife. I didn't even know I was holding it right. I grabbed it from him because he tried to poke me with it, so I feared for my life. He says it over and over. They're pushing me, shoving, I tripped, I fell down. I got up, and that's where I saw one of the kids there, the closest kid with the knife, and I grabbed it. Again, you'll hear he was already told he was under arrest for homicide. Nicolae asked Lieutenant Hart, so what happened? Can you tell me what happened? Lieutenant Hart says, yes, 4 people went to the hospital with injuries. Nicolae says, oh my God. Lieutenant Hart says, and one person died. Nicolae says, oh no. Lieutenant Hart says, I don't know their names or their genders, I don't know. And Nicolae asks, is that because they fought each other? Again, you'll see this in the video of Nicolae walking off to the right shore before walking back to his group. You'll hear from Gilma Costanza, who's one of the tubers in his group, that as he walked back after the incident, he did not walk back directly to the group. He walked over to the shore across from them and threw something onto the bank. This is you'll hear from Chuck Coleman from the Sheriff's Office. It's a 3D rendering. This is a bird's eye view of it. These are approximate locations. You'll hear on where things happened. The river in this image is flowing downstream, or down to the bottom. So the bridge would be below this image. The white dot is approximately where the boys were when Nicolae first made contact with them. They continued to drift down a little bit. Carlson's group is that pink dot. They also continued to float down, so at the time of the incident, they were more kind of parallel with Isaac's group. And then orange dot is the sandbar that you'll see in the video where that the Nicolae's group was. That star, you'll hear that's where law enforcement found the knife. This is that knife that was found on the shore. You'll hear that this knife was sent to Wisconsin State Crime Lab, tested positive for blood. It was compared to DNA samples of the 5 people that were stabbed. It had DNA, Dante, and Isaac on it. By close of trial, you'll see that these were senseless and horrific acts of violence when all Nicolae had to do was walk away. At the close of trial, the state will ask you to find Nicolae guilty of first-degree intentional homicide of Isaac Schuman, attempted first-degree intentional homicide of Ryhley Mattison, A.J. Martin, Dante Carlson, and Tony Carlson, battery, Madison.
Thank you. Members of the jury, we are going to take a short recess. We'll come back at 2:10. Please take the jury out.
All rise for the jury.
And welcome back to our Fox 9 streaming studios here in Eden Prairie as we watch the opening statements in the Nicolae Miu Apple River stabbing trial. That was St. Croix County District Attorney Carl Anderson, excuse me. He delivered about a 40-minute opening statement calling the stabbing senseless. Nicolae Miu's response. Here is your defense opening statement in the St. Croix County Courthouse in Hudson.
Nick Miu standing in the river with 13 strangers. 13 drunk, angry strangers. 13 against 1. They yelled and they screamed in order to attract a crowd. They got a crowd. They told lies to make the crowd angry. He's looking for little girls. He's looking for little girls. They layered their lies. They made them louder to make the crowd more angry. He's a predator. He's a predator. They chanted. They pulled on him. They closed the space around him. They got up in his face and they pushed him. Somebody else pushed him. And they pointed and they pushed and they pushed and they pushed. And when he put up his left hand, to block and protect himself as they're in his space, in his face, he puts up his left hand to protect himself. And then they got violent. They got violent. They knocked a grown man, punched him, knocked him into the water. And when he's down in the water, they come up on him and they hit him again when he's down in the water. When he tries to get up out of the water, they attack him from the front, smack him across the front of the face, while somebody else comes from behind and starts pushing him down. At that moment, he feared for his life. And he responded in self-defense. Let me show you what they did. Dante Carlson, who had earlier come over into that group. Right? His dad had sent him over to help Nick. But the crowd got Dante going, and it didn't matter. He was going to hit him. And when the opportunity arose, as Dante Carlson will tell you, he laid him out. Knocks a grown man back off of his feet, where it's not just his butt. You'll see on the video, it's his shoulder, it's his head. He goes into the water. He didn't have a measuring stick. He wasn't figuring out what the height of the water is. He went in the water because they hit him in the water. And when he's down, you'll see he's down in the water. And Dante Carlson, who punched him with his right hand, right? He was so confident. He was so confident. Had his beer in his left hand. And then he's given a beat down with his right hand. He then runs around him as Nick is falling into the water. And he's in the water. He runs around him with the beer in his hand because he knows he's got his group around him. And then he comes around and he smacks him again. You can see in the first photo, you can see the shadow of Dante's arm coming across. And you can see it hits him across the face and across the ear. That's not just a slap. That's a full hand. You'll watch the video. It knocks him down. And then when he's down in the water, you'll see A.J. Carlson, who you'll hear tells you that he came over there to mediate. But for whatever reason, maybe it's because of a crowd, maybe it's because of a mob, maybe it's some other mentality. But when this happens, he sees this old man down on the ground. He doesn't go to help him. He goes to push him from behind. And while he's pushing him from behind, look in the upper corner there. That's Dante's arm. You can see in the middle slide, that's Dante's hand smacking Mew across the front of his head. And then you'll see on the third slide, that's where he's extending through. So confident he's going to beat this old man down that he keeps the drink in his hand. That's the close-up that you can see through there. Dante Carlson hitting Nick Mew in the face while his friend attacks him from behind. You're going to need to make some choices in this case, right? Make some decisions. some of the things that might help you to do. Let me just take a step back, all right? Who is Nick Beaver? Who's the man that they wanted to beat down on the river? We're going to tell you about that. How did he get there? What made him in the river on that day, as we saw here earlier? And we'll tell you that story. And then lastly, why did this angry mob, this pack of players, why did they attack him? And we're going to tell you. First, who is Nick, right? Nick's 54 years old, lives in Prior Lake. He's married, right? See a photo. You'll hear from his wife, Sandy, okay? She's going to be a witness. She was there with him that day. Him and a bunch of other 50-year-olds went to go have a peaceful day on the river. Right? Nick grew up in Romania. Right? And when he was about 15 or 16, he immigrated over here. We're not going to get really into it. Romania was not a good place to be in the 80s. Communist dictator, all kinds of other bad stuff was going on. And Nick's dad, like a lot of people in the world, wanted to have a better place for his family to grow up. So they, political refugees, were accepted by a church in Minnesota, and they came over to Minnesota. When Nick was growing up, his first language was Romanian. Because he lived in this communist dictatorship, he also needed to learn Russian. Because he was in Europe, he also learned to speak French. Because he's this pretty smart guy, he also learned Latin. So when he was 15 and 16, he comes over to the United States, and then he picks up English as his fifth language. He can speak fluent English. He's fine. I think it's important for you to know that's not his first language. When he graduates from high school in Minnesota, he decides he wants to go on and further his education, and he goes to school in South Dakota. He becomes a mechanical engineer. He's worked as a mechanical engineer for years and years. Bit of a handyman, as I imagine a lot of engineers are, right? I don't think of myself as a handyman. He's a handyman, good with tools, hangs out with tools. And you'll hear from other people how he's used tools in the past. And you'll hear on the tape as he tells the police, living a peaceful, quiet life in Minnesota. Never been together. Him and some of his work friends, as all of us sometimes as adults, our circle of friends tends to be people that we work with. He has a group of friends, Amanda and Ernesto. They've been down the Apple River before. In fact, they've invited him before, and he's been down the river one time before, several years earlier. So they make a plan with all of the group of people that we saw, right? Oh, I forgot one thing here. Nick, like a lot of people, maybe as they get older, isn't of the best health. In 2020, he had a heart attack. And he needed to have quadruple bypass open heart surgery. So and he'll tell you how that still makes him feel fragile, right? He doesn't feel as fit as he was when he was 18 or 22. So he decides to get out on the river with his friends. These are some of the friends, and as you'll see in photos, right? He's in the water that day, it's warm that day. Sometimes he's wearing his sunglasses, sometimes he's not. Sometimes he's got a hat on, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he has his shirt on, sometimes he doesn't. This is the photo of the start, which is pretty much the exact same thing he was wearing at the end. His friends Amanda and Ernesto asked him to come along. There's a lot of other adults that are coming, right? There's no 20-somethings, no teenagers. They pack food in coolers. Sure, they have a couple of beers, but it's really just a time to get together with their other adults and float peacefully down the river. Nick likes to snorkel, right? So he brought his goggles and his snorkel, right? That's just kind of who Nick is. He's a bit of an explorer, a bit of a curious mind, and he'd brought his goggles and snorkel. And you'll see a video of him prior to this where he's just kind of laying in the water, letting the water rush over him. Well, he kind of floats there with the goggles and the snorkel, and he's looking at the bottom of the water. Probably not a lot of exciting things at the bottom of the water in Apple River, but he was there to see it if there was something there. Before he leaves, he gets a call from his friend Ernesto, because Ernesto knows Nick and knows that Nick's a bit of a handy man, and is like, hey, remember last time we had all those strings? We got all those strings, you got to cut up stuff, you got to do this. Can you bring that little pocket knife that you've got, that utility knife? I've seen you use it at my house. You used it as a tool. Make sure you bring that, because we need to cut up some of the strings. So he does. It's back, packs that up, brings it along. And sure enough, when they get there, they have their provided strings, and then people you'll see, they tie up tubes, they tie up coolers, they tie up everything else, and he uses his pocket knife to sometimes cut those. Right? You'll also see as he's going through on the river that day that his shoes kind of fall apart. Right? And you'll see that pictures of his shoes, he's got strings, and he's tied them up, and he continues to cut with the little pocket knife that he has to make sure that his shoes, footwear, or something that he can have. So they float down the river. All right, this is the group. You saw that photo already with Mr. Anderson showed that to them, right? And again, here he has the hat on. Here he's got the hat off. You'll see later, not surprisingly, when he goes to snorkel, he doesn't have his sunglasses on. Sometimes when he snorkeled, he had a shirt on. Other times he took it off. Here's another picture of him on the river with the group. Again, has the hat back on, depending upon what the sun is. So, how did he get there, right? Well, as we talked about, Ariel, his friend, loses his phone. Right? And whether they wanted to look for it or didn't want to look for it, I don't know how that's relevant. I don't know how his wanting to go help his friend look for his phone is any way important. You'll get to decide that. But we know at the end of the day is, it's uncontested, his friend lost his phone. And as you saw in some of those photos, they have these little bags that they put him on, and they didn't know if it was going to float, if it was going to sink. But the water between him and the other two groups was downstream. So if something went into the water, it would float towards where those other two groups were. So Nick used his head and walked where he thought the phone was going to float to, and he goes looking for it, right? And then while he's looking for it, he runs into another group, right? And this is the group that we're going to talk about, two different groups, right? The first group he runs into is this group of high school, right? And you're going to hear that they're drunk. You're going to hear that they were smoking stuff. The one piece of evidence that we know for sure is that at the time of the autopsy, Isaac Schuman's blood alcohol concentration was 0.219. And if you ask his friends are going to say he was the most sober one in the group. So we have this group, they're drunk, they're loud, there's 6 of them, they're football players, they've run as a pack together before. You're going to hear some videos, they're quite confident group, right? And they see this man that maybe others are going to judge upon his appearance. This group of 6 see him and they start making judgments about him based on what he looks like. He's an old man in the river with goggles, and they don't like him. So they start calling him names. Right? And there's a video, you're going to hear it, because they start harassing him, they start heckling him. They're basically trying to humiliate him. That's what they're doing. And Mr. Cockfield, one of the football players, he grabs his phone out and he thinks it's funny enough that he's going to record it. And you'll see that recording just before this, where he says, "Grown man looking for little girls." And he thinks it's really funny. And then he screams out, "Raper!" He doesn't scream that out for his benefit of his 5 football friends that are with him. He screams it out to draw a crowd, get other people involved. Now, Mr. Mew may or may not have heard that exact thing, but he hears them yelling, and he turns around, and what does he see? He's looking for a phone, right? We know that. And when he turns around, he sees somebody holding up a phone. Maybe he's wrong, maybe he's mistaken about why they're holding up the phone, but he sees them holding up a phone, so he turns around to approach them because he thinks that's the phone he's looking for. I'm looking for this phone, it floated down this way, these kids are yelling. And he starts jogging towards them. As you saw, as he jogs toward them, he's an unfit 260-pound man trying to move through the water, and he picks up his feet for about 4 steps, and then he reaches his hands out to grab their tubes, and when he does so, he puts the snorkel and the goggles in his mouth. Maybe they thought it was an act of aggression. I don't really think it was. You'll get to see it and watch it. But we know nothing happens after that. Because as soon as he goes and approaches, the goggles and the snorkel drop. He loses them and he immediately starts looking for them. That's about 5 seconds into the video. He starts looking for them and they start yelling at him, "Get away, get away, get away." So if this is the tubes, right? You as the jury, you're looking downstream this way, right? Nick is standing here in front of the tubes. He looks, he comes up, and then he walks to the other side of their tubes. He's now on this side of their tubes, downstream from them. He's downstream because that's where he thinks the goggles and the snorkels come. And did he tell the police officer that he thought they knocked the goggles and snorkels out of his hand? Yes, he did. Is that what he believed happened? Yes, it was. Is that what really happened? No, that's not what happened. And the great thing you're going to be able to see in this case is there's a video. There's a video that we can check everybody's testimony against. And you know what? Ryhley Mattison got it wrong. Dante Carlson got it wrong. Madison Cohen got it wrong. Anthony Carlson got it wrong. Pretty much every witness, when you compare their human memory against the video, they got it wrong. Because we're humans. They can't get it as good as the video does. So he got that wrong, but he's still nevertheless looking for his goggles. His goggles are down in the water. He's looking for it, right? He starts walking around there. There's nothing that prevents this group of football players who are screaming at him from just walking around. He's one man, maybe 2 feet wide. And you hear from there, they talk about him walking away, but they can just walk, just float on by and leave this man alone. But they stay to harass, they stay to heckle, they stay to humiliate. Because he starts walking away from them. And if you watch and you count, you watch it enough times, he takes about 10 steps away from them. And it's sometime during those 10 steps, when that group says, "You got 10 seconds. 10 seconds. That's what this group of drunk teenagers says to that old man. And he's walking away at that point. And then what you'll see when the video comes back, he walked away and followed. They followed. They didn't go around. They went right up to him where he had walked away. Now remember, as he's walking in this direction, his group is 200 and some feet that way, 280 feet that way. This water is deeper. As he starts walking away, he gets into deeper water. He doesn't have his goggles, doesn't have his snorkel, still can't find the phone. He's getting farther away from this group. The drunken teenagers are yelling at him, and now they keep following him. Now, this video, all right, we're going to show some slides from the video. And it's super important, obviously. We're very thankful that we have it so that you will know exactly what happened. But what you got to remember is the video is taken by Juwan Cockfield. It is from Juwan Cockfield's perspective. It's from his point of view, right? It makes it obvious. And so the person that we're watching oftentimes is Nick Mew, right? But you need to know, which is obvious, that the video is not from Nick's perspective. We're not watching it from Nick's perspective, we're watching it from somebody else's perspective. And why is that important? Because the judge is going to tell you, right? It's important because at the end of the case, you'll need to determine the reasonableness of his beliefs from his point of view. You'll need to determine the reasonableness of his beliefs, not actions. You're here to determine his beliefs and the reasonableness from his point of view. So as you're watching that video, you're going to be asked at the end to be like, what would someone in Mew's position, from that standpoint, what would they feel? What would they believe? Let me just quickly read to this, right? If I can, the law of self-defense. In determining reasonableness, a belief may be reasonable even though mistaken. In determining whether Nick Mew's beliefs were reasonable, the standard is what a person of ordinary intelligence and prudence would have believed in Nick's position under the circumstances that existed at the time of the alleged offense. Not 30 seconds before, not a minute before, at the time of the alleged offense. The reasonableness of Nick's beliefs must be determined from the standpoint of Nick Mew at the time of his acts, and not from the viewpoint of the jury now. So I say that to you just so you know when we're looking at the evidence, what you're going to be asked to do at the end. So they get him into this position, and this is 50 seconds into the video. He's walked 10 steps away. They come up to him and approach him and cut him off. So he walks away one time, they follow him. But Nick, right, sees, right, so he's here. He's got a group of people here, and he looks off to his left, and he sees a group of adults. There's 2 adults coming this way. Great, adults, not drunk teenagers. Adults are coming this way. He doesn't continue to engage with this. He gets and starts walking over here. He walks over to engage with the adults in the hope, as I think most of us do, when we see perhaps another adult and we're dealing with a group of drunk teenagers, maybe I can appeal to reason. These are adults. And when he walks over this way and the path down the river is wide open, those drunk teenagers follow him. Follow him over here, where he then gets confronted by Madison Cohen. And Madison Cohen is not listening. She's not there for an appeal to reason. Her immediate words are to Nick Mew in his face, go, get the fuck out, go. And you'll see Nick's reaction is kind of like, as you heard from they have my goggles, like, why are you in my face? What's going on? And you can see, they'll call it a smirk, they'll call it a smile. Look, there's 4,819 frames in that video. 4,819 frames. I have no doubt that you can pause on one of those 4,819 frames and find a photo where somebody's mouth is making a particular shape of anything at any time. Is he smirking? Is he smiling? You watch, you decide. Because he looks perplexed. He's immediately confronted, and he starts to give an explanation, and Dante Carlson tells him, it doesn't matter. Right? Appeal to reason? Nope, we're not doing that. That's kicked out the door. There is no appeal to reason at all. And while this is going on, the Carlson group, right, who sent 2 people over, also has Quentin Carlson, and he's an older adult. Madison Cohen, Dante Carlson, A.J. Martin, they're in their early 20s, which is fine. They're certainly adults, but that might be different than somebody in their 40s. Quentin Carlson, he sees what's going on, and what he says, I was worried about the group against one guy. I was worried that they were going to gang up on him and something bad was going to happen to the old guy. So I told my son Tony and Dante to go make sure they don't attack that old guy. That's not somebody looking at it from Nick's perspective, but that's somebody who can see maybe what Nick sees, hear what Nick hears, and his thought is, oh, something bad's going to happen to that old guy. So he sends over his kids. And when they come over, right, the high school group continues in what I think we now know, it's a new term, is they gaslight him. They just start making up lies in order to affect his perception of reality and everybody else's perception of reality. As soon as that group comes over, that high school group says, he's a predator. And then immediately they're like, he's looking for little girls, he's looking for little girls. There will be zero evidence that there were ever little girls even anywhere near on that river. Zero. There's going to be zero evidence that he was looking for little girls. But they drum up, right? They get this crowd going. They've got the two people here, and they start yelling that. And then the crowd gets to be more, right? As this is going on, it's about 1:13, 1:15 into it, where they start screaming at him, he's looking for little girls. And then you'll see as he's standing here, after he's walked away from that group, he walks over to the adults, he's kind of pointing at them like, I got my snorkel. And they confront him. And as he's standing there, he turns his back on her and them, and he just stands here. And as he's standing with his back turned, and the path down the river is wide open, instead of just walking on by, Madison Cone decides she's going to put her hands on him, and she grabs him and starts pulling him. Pulling him, and you'll see he turns around and immediately looks to his hand and says, don't touch me. Don't put your hands on me. They don't walk away. They stand right there. The crowd, the drunk high schoolers, continue to say he's looking for little girls. Somebody says, is that what he said? And then it changes to the next lie is, we've got it on camera. We've got it on camera. You're going to see that they downloaded that phone. There ain't nothing like that on the camera. There ain't nothing like that on the camera because that's not what happened. Because these drunk teenagers were gaslighting him and they're enticing a crowd. Nick stands there. He's now got people all around him, right? They're chanting at him, he's a predator, he's a predator. He's all alone. It's getting louder. He raises his left hand to his group. Like, we need some help here. Like something's going on, right? And when that happens, you'll see the camera, Jawan Cohen turns the camera to show where he's waving to. So the high school group has knowledge that Nick Mew, who's standing right here, doesn't want to go that way. Nick Mew, who's blocked right here, wants to go that way. Because that's where his group is, because that's where everybody looks. And you'll see on the camera Madison Cohen as she stands and he waves. She turns and looks and sees he's got some friends. So does Madison Cohen say, yeah, why don't you just go that way? She doesn't. What she does is she reaches to her friends and says, hey, get over here. She calls in more numbers. She calls in more numbers to confront him. Because at that point it was 8 against 1 and she wanted more. So she brought over Ryhley, she brought over Janelle, she brought over Gabby, and then she calls for Anthony, and then she calls for AJ. And then it's those 13 people that surround him, right? And they're standing there, and you're going to see, they're all around him. They are relentless in what they're yelling and screaming. From his standpoint, this is like, what is happening? What world did I just step into in which there's this group of drunk kids, drunk teenagers who, they want to say kids, I get it, but you saw those pictures. They're all bigger than Nick. Nick's smaller than he was then, right? But he hasn't grown any. He's just shrunk more, right? But he's not a big, fit guy, right? They're screaming, they're chanting, right? And at that point, yes, Nick, outnumbered 13-1, reaches in his pocket, finds his pocket knife, opens it up, and stands there with it. He doesn't brandish it, but he doesn't hide it. He's standing there with it. His belief at that point is, I don't want to use this. I don't think showing it to him is going to help. But if something happens, I don't know what's going to happen. So he's standing there with the knife. And as he's standing there with the knife, Ryhley Mattison is right in front of him, and she pushes on him. You'll see that in the video. And then next to her, who's blocking him from his people, is Madison Cohen. She takes her right hand and she pushes his left shoulder. And he has to go back. She pushes him back. And while all this is going on, the group of drunk teenagers are screaming, chanting, yelling. The numbers are getting bigger. They come over towards him. All right? They push him again. They block his path. And this is the same. That's what it looks like. You're Mew. You're looking upriver to see where your safety is. Behind you is deeper water. You've walked in that direction before. You appealed to reason, and they said it doesn't matter. They're up in his face, right? And Madison Cohen's pushing and pointing at him, right? And Mew's standing there. He's got the knife in his right hand. He doesn't use the knife. He's standing there while they're pushing and pointing at him, right? And when he does that, all of a sudden, that's when Dante Carlson gets violent, right? He's predisposed for violence, I submit to you. That's the entire purpose of the gaslighting, of getting the crowd there, of yelling with the crowd, of getting it all jacked up, is Jawan Cohen wanted to record a viral video in which some old man was getting beat down, and he was going to get it on tape. He created that world. He put him in that world.
Object, a lot of this is argument, not summarizing.
Sustained. Please focus on what you anticipate the evidence will show.
That's what the evidence is going to show, right? Dante Carlson has told you before, and he'll say, it doesn't matter, right? At that moment, that's when Nick Mew raises his left hand to protect himself. He's raised it before to call for help. I think I missed it. He raised another time to call for help, a second time, and now they're crowded around him in his face. He raises his hand to protect it, and that's when they get violent, right? It's a push, not a punch. It's a push to protect himself, not a punch. The evidence. You'll watch that video. You might watch it 20 times. It's not on the video. There's no punch on the video. She's standing there yelling, and when she's standing there yelling, there are two people between her and Nick Mew. He's got the knife in his right hand, right? It's not on the video. There's no physical evidence. She says he punches her with his right hand. He's got the knife in his right hand. There's not a mark on her. You're going to see from John Schultz, his video, he spoke with her right then. He's right in her face. He's got a body cam. You'll get to see the body cam of her face, and she, not a blemish on it, not a mark on it. Doesn't support that he punched her. Third thing, multiple evolving stories. Listen to what the witnesses say. Who really says is there a punch, and what position were they in to say it? Because here's what they said before. Quentin Carlson, he told the police, she said he was punched. She said he punched her, but they said it was a slap. So everybody else initially said it was a slap. Gabby, one of the witnesses, says he smacked her with his left hand. She's consistent with he raised his left hand. Mr. Alexander Vang, one of the high school kids, says he hit her with an open hand with his left hand. AJ, he says he saw him pull her hair, which nobody's going to say. That's just wrong. Nobody's going to say anything along those lines. Dante, the person who laid him out after he said that, spoke with the police, and initially what he said to the police is I saw Mew make a swift motion to Ryhley Mattison. Then he says, I saw Mew make a motion towards Ryhley Mattison. Then he says, I saw Mew make a swift motion to Ryhley Mattison. Then he says a fourth time, swift motion, Ryhley Mattison. I don't know what he's going to say when he comes up there now, but what he said before isn't a punch, and it wasn't to Madison Cohen. That's when the violence begins. right? They attracted the crowd, they moved in closer. Now, one of the things you're gonna wanna ask, and we will ask that, is when this happens, this group of 13 is around and the old man gets knocked and he's down in the ground. Listen to the video. Is there anybody in the group that says, whoa, this is out of hand? No. You'll hear when he gets knocked on the ground, the volume goes up. The cackling and the laughing goes up. And the videographer pushes people away to get in closer to document the beatdown as well as he can. This isn't somebody that's just taking a video on the side. And then again, we move around. Dante Carlson is confident enough to still have the beer in his hand while this happens. Hugh's response is in self-defense, right? People come at him, and he makes a quick, short jab motion. He believes he has to use the knife because he's outnumbered. A.J. Martin once. Ryhley Mattison once. Dante Carlson twice, but he only has 2 stitches. Isaac Schuman once. Dante Carlson once. When they come at him, he gives a quick jab. They back up. He doesn't lunge for them. He doesn't follow them. He doesn't recklessly swing it around. They come at him after they gave him a beat down, and he jabs out. When even Brandy Hart, I think you're going to hear from her, right? When Mr. Giraffe, asks her questions. When people attacked you, he responded. She agrees with that. So, what happens is pretty much all on video, right? At the end, the judge is going to read you that jury instruction similar to what he did about credibility. And how much of credibility is going to play a part in this trial is going to be up to you. You guys are the finders of fact. You decide what happened. But I'd submit to you, it's all on video. Pretty much know what happened because it's on video. All right? So, we can talk about credibility. Nick spoke with the police, right? He told them he was afraid. He told them he feared for his life. He told them he was acting in self-defense. He also told them, I don't really remember anything. And he lied to the police about the knife. He did. He lied about the knife. It was his knife. He brought it. He was outnumbered. He believed he needed to use it. The truth is, he used it because he was surrounded by that angry mob and he was afraid, right? They gave him every reason to be afraid. When their attacks stopped, he walked away. When they stopped, kept coming at him, and every one of them came at him, right? He responded like a victim of trauma response. You'll hear from witnesses in his group who will say he looked like he was in shock. He was white as a ghost. From his perspective, right? He had just been attacked by an angry mob who was trying to kill him, and he got out of there. So as he walks back, he still has fear, right? It's not something that just goes away. That fear is deep inside of him at that point. And as he walks away, he wants nothing to do with the group that just attacked him. He wants nothing to do with the knife, and he tosses it up onto the shore. Maybe not the best decision. Maybe not how he should have responded. But he was suffering from serious shock and trauma at that time. That's what he did. It's not going to be a contested fact. He looks back to his group, right? And they'll say that he's wide-eyed, he's white as a ghost. Remember, he'd just been repeatedly hit in the head, pushed down into the water. His body continued to respond in that way. When he walked away, he knew he'd done some quick jab motions. He didn't know the extent of anyone's injuries. Did he hear them yelling? Sure. They'd been yelling for 2 minutes, screaming and yelling at him. He had been in trauma at that point. He didn't know what the yelling was about. He didn't know that anyone had died. Maybe he should have. Okay, fair enough. But in that situation, would you expect him, who'd just been attacked and responded in just short, quick jab motions, to know the extent of everyone's injuries? They go back and everyone's like waiting. Traffic on the river pretty much shuts down and they wait there. When the police come by and kind of basically move everybody along, his group moves along to the exit. He's got his hat and his sunglasses and his shirt on, just like he did at the start of the trip. Right? He's been in shock. He'll tell you he was cold. So there's really, these are the 3 things that you need to think about, right? 1, what happened? Don't think it's going to be a big mystery. It's on video. And I hope that that's helpful to you. Because the facts, I don't think, are going to be very contested. 2, you are going to be asked, what did Nick believe? Right? He told the police, and he'll tell you, he feared for his life. In that moment, against that group who were violent with him and knocked him down, he feared for his life. Right? The video evidence supports this. Right? And I'd ask you rhetorically, what other reason is there? What other reason could there be? They came at him. He was in fear. He responded. The last question. Were his beliefs reasonable? I don't want to belabor the point about the law, right? Can't find it right away. But it's from his viewpoint, right? It's from his standpoint. The belief may be reasonable even though mistaken. In determining whether Nick Mew's beliefs were reasonable, the standard is what a person of ordinary intelligence and prudence would have believed in Nick Mew's position under the circumstances that existed at the time of the alleged offense. So what do we know that might help you to decide that, right? We know he walked away and they followed. We know he tried explaining to them and they said, it doesn't matter. We know they told lies about him to incite the crowd. We know he knows that those were lies, and he was watching as this crowd gets louder and more intense and bigger. We know they cut him off from where he wanted to go back up to his wife and his friends. We know that somebody else that was watching, who was kind of like Nick, a little bit younger, about the same fitness level though. And when that person, Quentin Carlson, sees what's going on, his first thought is, there's something bad that's going to happen to that old guy. We know he was surrounded, we know he was outnumbered, and we know that this environment was ripe for violence. That's the environments they carry. And we know that Nick is fragile. He believed he was fragile. This is somebody who went through open heart surgery within a couple of years. He didn't have fitness. They attacked him, kept attacking him, and they gave him every reason to believe they weren't going to stop. Were his beliefs reasonable? This is Isaac Schuman. I'm sure he is a wonderful man, wonderful human being. And we're going to hear a lot about him. But in this moment, on this day, on that river, when he was drunk, he tried to strangle Nick Mew. His hands were on his throat. He was pushing up against Nick Mew. And Nick reaches out as he's falling back. That is what Nick did. His belief at the time, when he's being strangled after being constantly attacked, was he needed to get out of there. And the only way that he could do that was with his knife. He believed his life was in danger. And we submit to you under those circumstances. That's reasonable. At the end of the trial, we're going to come back up here, right? We'll be back up here, and we're going to ask you to return a verdict of not guilty on all counts. The judge will tell you on that last day, he'll tell you the law. If you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypotheses consistent with Nick's innocence, you must return a verdict of not guilty. Okay, just one more time. The judge will tell you, if you can reconcile the evidence on any reasonable hypotheses consistent with Nick's innocence, you must do so. You must return a verdict of not guilty. Only reasonable hypothesis in this case is he feared for his life. And that belief was not unreasonable. They created that world to get that environment. In that world, he believed it in that moment. And that's reasonable, because anyone in that situation would have believed the same. So at the end, we'll ask you to do your duty.
In a moment, we will hear from the state's first witness. Members of the jury, members of the gallery, if you want to stand and stretch, you may. We are not going to take a recess. I'll give the attorneys a moment or two to reorganize their tables.